You know what really grinds my gears? It is almost impossible to keep up with the hype in tech news these days. A few weeks ago, Anthropic launched a model so strong that it could supposedly build anything from your next billion-dollar startup to GTA 6 and even a half-decent Windows operating system. Sadly, I live somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Europe, so by the time I wanted to actually try Fable, the US government decided that me coding a Flappy Bird clone is a national security risk. However, I didn't get the chance to stay upset for too long, because just a couple of days later, we got to enjoy the SpaceX IPO and all the financial experts announced a market crash which would take us back to the 1920s Great Depression. But the IPO came and went, the bubble did not pop, and Elon Musk is now a trillionaire. This means the second richest person in the world is technically closer in wealth to you and me than to Musk. Fun times. But this also means SpaceX suddenly had a massive influx of cash, and apparently the first thing they decided to do with it was spend $60 billion acquiring Cursor. For context, Cursor was currently looking to raise $2 billion at a valuation of $50 billion. But before we blow this out of proportion and make it yet another hype story, where a coding agent is now worth $60 billion, we need to get a few things straight. The important detail is that SpaceX is not actually writing a $60 billion check. This is an all-stock deal where Cursor's owners are getting SpaceX shares, and their final value depends on where SpaceX stock trades later. So the headline says 60 billion, but the real outcome depends on whether SpaceX keeps floating upward or the bubble will actually pop. This is a pretty insane deal, and there is even a $4 billion breakup fee if antitrust regulators look at a rocket company buying a text editor and find the whole deal kind of fishy. However, we all know that will never happen. What's interesting is that Cursor will now get access to xAI's massive Colossus supercomputer cluster in Memphis to solve their compute shortage. For a bit of context on the infrastructure involved, the Memphis facility is a massive industrial conversion of a former manufacturing plant. To scale up training capacity rapidly, xAI deployed a cluster of roughly 200,000 top-of-the-line Nvidia GPUs. And because building this outpaced the local utility grid's capacity to deliver immediate high-voltage power, the facility relies on dozens of mobile industrial gas turbines to generate its own electricity on site. At full load, a cluster of this scale requires upwards of 100 to 150 megawatts of power, which is comparable to the energy consumption of a small city. Furthermore, dissipating the thermal output of hundreds of thousands of accelerator chips requires massive closed-loop or evaporative liquid cooling systems, which demand millions of gallons of water daily for heat rejection. And Musk fans like to point out that he now controls the entire stack, ranging from the compute to data centers to models like Grok, even though I don't think anybody really uses Grok, and now the tool millions of engineers actually open every morning. Some might wonder what any of this has to do with launching rockets into space, but that hardly matters when SpaceX is apparently trying to become the Walmart of the tech sector. It looks like Elon didn't get the Anthropic memo stating that coding is solved, and he is now trying to solve code yet again. And if you think about it, this is not entirely insane because SpaceX is actually an internet provider. Starlink is a massive orbiting mesh network of thousands of satellites that requires constant automated orchestration. If you're Elon, you don't want to pay Microsoft for GitHub Copilot licenses for the army of engineers keeping Starlink alive. You buy the tool, anchor it to your own supercomputer, and vertically integrate your entire software pipeline just like you did with rocket valves. But it isn't all sunshines and rainbows. This also comes at a time when Musk just predicted that AI agents will soon bypass traditional programming languages, entirely generating compiled machine code directly from human intent. He claims AI can produce more efficient binaries than human-written compilers, essentially shifting the engineer's role from writing syntax to validating. Don't get me wrong, I'm just a dumb guy from the middle of nowhere, so I'm in no position to contradict the first trillionaire in the world, but if my math is right, a Hello World program in C is around 40 tokens, its assembly equivalent is around 110 tokens, and the final binary equivalent is roughly around 500 tokens. So instead of asking an LLM to generate your solution in a high-level programming language for fewer tokens, you would ask it to generate it in binary at 10 times the cost. And I guess the benefit of this approach is that you get something that no human can actually read, understand, or debug. So you now have a full dependency on an LLM to tweak anything in your application. What's more concerning is that if software is generated directly into unreadable, obfuscated binaries, open source collaboration dies. You can't fork a GitHub repository if the repository is just a blob of machine code, so software turns into a black box that only the model provider can maintain, securing the ultimate monopoly. Open source is already going through a rough patch these days because of AI, so a shift to binary will be the last nail in its coffin. On the upside, AI companies will lock you in and will make a lot of money. That's the problem with these people. They can't just say that the technology is good enough and move on. They always have something new to sell to you to boost their profits. 15 years ago it was self-driving cars, 1 year ago it was AGI, and now it is something crazy like data centers in space. For instance, I'm sure you guys remember the hype around OpenClaw from a few months ago. It was one of the first AI personal assistants that people seriously talked about, and even though it was a vibe-coded mess with some very obvious security problems, it was still impressive enough for OpenAI to hire the developer behind it. At the time, people were throwing around the number as high as $1 billion, but now, 6 months later, that figure is still impossible to verify, which says a lot about how these stories usually spread in the AI world. This is why I am careful with these stories. A few months ago, everyone was hyping OpenClaw as the next AI assistant breakthrough. There were rumors about massive acquisition numbers, OpenAI hiring the developer, and a billion-dollar aura around the whole thing. 6 months later, most people have moved on, and the hype cycle found something new to focus on. But I think that the main takeaway of this story is the infrastructure angle. There is no denying LLMs are now part of the reality of building software, mostly because we developers helped create this monster. Frontier Labs realized that software is a lucrative business where they can charge subscriptions, sell API access, push enterprise plans, and make every company feel outdated for not having an AI strategy. And at this scale, AI is actually a hardware and energy business. Models need chips, chips need power, and power needs grid capacity, cooling, land, permits, and money. This is why companies are racing to secure GPU clusters instead of just building better chatbots. The Memphis cluster gives Musk companies direct access to large-scale AI compute. For a coding tool like Cursor, that matters because inference cost and model access are now core product constraints. A better editor helps, but fast and affordable model access decides how useful the product can become at scale. The future of AI coding tools will probably be decided by compute economics. Being able to run the best models cheaply while serving millions of developers without losing money on every prompt will be the main differentiator moving forward. And this is extremely relevant considering the advent of local models and Nvidia's push to turn consumer machines into small AI workstations. And if you think about it, Nvidia is actually the only company winning no matter what. They sell chips to big tech data centers while simultaneously trying to sell every developer a local workstation capable of running incredibly powerful open-weight models right on their desk. And before wrapping things up, here is your awesome trivia for the day. The initial Colossus was one of the first electronic digital computers built in Britain during World War II at Bletchley Park. It was designed to help break the Lorenz cipher, a German encryption system used for high-level military communications. This was not the famous Enigma, which was used more broadly and became more famous later. Lorenz was used by German High Command, which made it strategically important. The machine read punched paper tape at high speed and performed logical operations to test possible cipher settings. It was not a general-purpose computer like modern machines, but it was programmable enough to be adapted for different cryptanalytic tasks. That makes it one of the key machines in the early history of computing. And what's really fascinating is that after the war, most Colossus machines were destroyed and the project remained classified for decades. If you like this video, you should consider joining our community where I'm posting more dedicated weekly content. Please don't forget to smash all the buttons and see you in the next one.